city leadership has made it crystal clear. For them, a real, functioning, effective Office of Inspector General is not welcome in Atlanta.
The Office of Inspector General here in the city of Atlanta has become ground zero for the ongoing national debate over government efficiency, government corruption, and government oversight. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, 2025, and this is Political Update from Atlanta News First and on AtlantaNewsFirst.com. I'm Tim Darnell, joined by our friend and colleague Rick Folbaum. And Rick, really, shockwaves were sent throughout the city of Atlanta's political spectrum earlier this week when the Office of Inspector General, I should say Inspector General Shannon Manigault, abruptly and very surprisingly offered her resignation. Before we get into that topic, I want to hear this report from Atlanta News First reporter Blake Devine.
We're talking about a very important position, as the Inspector General essentially serves as the city's watchdog, and Shannon Manigault announced her resignation Monday morning. Her reasoning: retaliation against her office's work to root out waste, fraud, and abuse within the Atlanta City Hall. This came just hours before local leaders approved a vote for new legislation limiting the Inspector General's subpoena power and access to city records. This the culmination of a months-long feud between top leadership in the city and Manigault, who says the writing was on the wall.
Is going to destroy the office. I'm not going to mince words about that. It is going to destroy the office.
The city of Atlanta really does need an OIG, an Office of Inspector General, and we will make sure that we do the proper bidding to make sure that we have an OIG as soon as possible.
Even though Manigault announced her resignation, her staff says she was unable to formally fill out a resignation letter as she's been cut off from city devices, meaning it's unclear if she's still in her current position. Reporting from Atlanta City Hall, Blake Devine, Atlanta News First.
Rick, Shannon Manigault said that she has been the subject and victim of bullying, harassment from Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens' regime, or administration, I should say, some Atlanta City Council members. And there are some Atlanta City Council members who say that Shannon Manigault has really overstepped her authority and her mandate to investigate corruption in the city of Atlanta by looking into and trying to obtain some personal electronic and financial information among some city employees. There's still a question as to whether or not her resignation has even been accepted or where the city goes from here, in a position that many Atlantans, I'm going to hazard to say, may not even know exist.
Yeah, let's start with that, actually, and sort of explain the Inspector General's office is supposed to be an independent body within the government that is a watchdog over the government, looking out for fraud, looking out for any kind of waste or any kind of mismanagement, anything that might not be above board when it comes to running the city. The Inspector General's office has the power to launch investigations and to issue reports, and we see this here locally, we see this nationally, and it's interesting that this is playing out here in Atlanta while very similar debates are being held at the national level. We see the Trump administration in its efforts to root out waste and fraud, going after a lot of the same types of people at the federal level, inspector generals who are in charge of overseeing different agencies within the federal government. The Trump administration it has been very, very quick about trying to make some changes in the short amount of time that President Trump has been in office again. And a lot of these changes have ruffled feathers, including some of the changes that his administration is making when it comes to these oversight positions of inspectors general. And so to see it playing out here in Atlanta with accusations against Mayor Dickens' office as opposed to President Trump's administration. It's just very interesting, sort of a microcosm for what's happening across the rest of the country, and we're going to have to see how this plays out. But she really felt, Manigault did, that some new rules that were being passed in the state legislature, in the city council, were going to undercut her ability to do her job. And so because of that, she felt it was best for her to step aside, and we'll see how that goes down.
And let's take this analogy that you drew about this being a microcosm of what's happening nationally. Let's expand that throughout the nation. This, of course, earlier this week was President's Day. We saw hundreds of thousands of people protesting in American cities throughout the U.S., including right here in Atlanta, over the Department of Government Efficiency. This is the department that has been created by executive order by President Donald Trump, one of his very first actions upon taking the office as the 47th President of the United States, and really tasking the effort of rooting out government inefficiency to Elon Musk, arguably the world's richest individual. There are a lot of protests and going on nationwide. We saw several on President's Day. On yesterday, Tuesday, we saw several thousand people protesting the terminations of some Centers for Disease Control Workers, which is an Atlanta-based organization. This has become one of the defining topics of Donald Trump's first 100 days in the Oval Office.
I mean, it really has been. I think the speed with which he has been moving since his swearing in has really, left a lot of people around the country, sort of shaking their heads a little bewildered at how quickly things are moving. But I don't think anyone should be surprised. This is exactly the kind of thing that President Trump ran on when he campaigned for this second term. He was elected in no small measure in order to follow through on these promises to shake things up and to shrink the size of the federal government. And so he said he was going to do it, and he's doing it. These policies that people are protesting, some people don't like them, but it must also be said that a lot of people are very happy with what President Trump is doing during these first few weeks in office. They're happy to see him moving forward as quickly as he is. Voters, I read a survey, voters being asked what they think of it. One person saying that he's going about 85 miles an hour. But again, this is really why a lot of people supported him and wanted him in office, was to do exactly these types of things. So that while there are protests, I think it should also be noted that this is nothing like the protests that were held after President Trump was sworn in the first time around in early 2017. We remember that he took office, and that within a week there was the Women's March in Washington that brought in so many women from around the country who were concerned and wanted to have their voices heard on the topic of reproductive rights and rights for women. And so, that was something that was just a massive display of protest. What we're seeing now are more sporadic sort of pop-up protests that are taking place around the country, including here in Atlanta. But again, it's not that kind of organized effort that we saw after President Trump took office for the first time.
And it's interesting, one of our first broadcasts together, I was asking you how this Donald Trump administration feels a little bit different than the first one, when we had, calls for impeachment really before he had even taken the oath of office the first time. Now it seems he has having won a solid electoral college majority and a pretty sizable majority among the popular vote. But let's talk a little bit more about some of the protests, because it's very interesting. We learned late yesterday afternoon, thanks to the efforts of our political reporter Doug Reardon, of another protest happening later today, Wednesday, February 19th. This one at 5 p.m. today, scheduled for outside the Richard B. Russell building, where we're looking at Atlanta federal workers and communities to rally February 19th against Elon Musk's takeover of public services. Elon Musk has really become a lightning rod for the Trump administration, hasn't he?
He really has. And, you know, I think that there's probably a part of President Trump that doesn't mind having him there, letting him take a lot of the heat. You remember a press conference that was held last week where Elon, in the Oval Office, in the president's own office, where he kind of was a bystander, just sort of sitting there at his desk while reporters peppered Elon Musk with questions. So in some regard, I think that President Trump is quite pleased that somebody like Elon Musk is there to sort of shoulder all of the criticism. So, you know, there's that part of it. But I think that a lot of people feel that, look, we voted for Donald Trump. We didn't vote for Elon Musk. Nobody voted for Elon Musk. And the more we hear him speak, where he misspeaks and misquotes numbers and facts and figures, and where he promises transparency in his efforts to shrink the government and eliminate waste, there really has not been a lot of transparency in terms of who is doing this work. Most of the members of his team are at this point still anonymous. There have been a number of lawsuits to try to force him to disclose the names of the people who are working under him, and to try to challenge some of the efforts that the department that he's running has made. But I must say, so far, the courts have not intervened in any kind of measurable way. They have really sort of opened the door and cleared the path for Elon Musk and his unnamed minions to continue the work that they're doing, at least right now. I'm sure that these lawsuits are going to continue, but so far, the vast majority of them have been unsuccessful.
One of the other issues besides government efficiency and besides the issue of immigration, which we've talked about extensively here on Political Update, and I'm sure we will continue to cover that issue, are the issue of overseas tariffs. The tariffs that President Trump is placing and in some cases have threatened to place on other countries. Governor Brian Kemp is recently or has been on another overseas international business recruiting mission. And before he left, he sat down with our political reporter, Doug Reardon, to really give his opinion on the issue of tariffs as they pertain to the Trump administration and to Georgia. Here is Doug Reardon's report.
And I learned a lot.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp speaks to us from the Munich Security Conference in Germany. The event made waves this week after U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance scolded European leaders for not contributing enough to their own national security and economic interests.
Because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent.
New tariffs from the White House have made the European market nervous, and Georgia has a lot to lose. We're the U.S. state with the 6th largest export market, and Kemp wants to keep things on an even keel with the 600 German companies who already do business with us.
I had a lot of conversations that people were concerned, but I think they also realize they got to quit just talking about all these things and they need to start taking action.
So Kemp is also trying to bring back new business with a simple message about Georgia's business environment and logistics network.
If you're making new moves, whether it's on R&D, manufacturing facilities, sales, whatever, give Georgia an opportunity to be in the mix for that.
Kemp has had success with overseas trips in the past, bringing back companies like solar panel maker Q-Cells and a new Hyundai plant that's the biggest economic investment in state history. He was in search of new manufacturers, automators, and new mineral technology that could decrease reliance on China and make everything from cars to computers cheaper for Georgians.
It's all about creating that next job and that next investment back home in the state of Georgia.
Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
Rick, we heard Governor Brian Kemp's opinions on President Trump's proposed tariffs. These international business recruiting efforts on behalf of the governor, they've really been a hallmark of his first term, and now coming to an end his second term. He really has truly delivered on promises and efforts to bring more internationally based businesses to Georgia. It's really been a hallmark of his administration.
For sure, definitely something that that he can point to and say, look, this is something that I promised I would do, and I've done it. You know, this big meeting in Germany that Governor Kemp flew over for, he was the only U.S. governor to attend that conference, and so, you know, it really, gave him the spotlight in order to lobby on behalf of Georgia, to explain to these world business leaders that Georgia is a good place to come and do business. It's a great place to set up a factory, to have your American headquarters be based, and to find the kind of workforce that is needed for a lot of these high-tech type of companies that the governor has been so successful in trying to lure to Georgia. But I thought it was interesting. You know, he was asked if he's hearing from people out in Germany as he holds these discussions, if anybody has voiced any concerns about the tariffs, and he said yes, that is something that people are asking him about. But he said that the main goal should be action rather than talk. We can talk about these tariffs all we want. The main issue is, what are we going to do? How are we going to adapt to them? And I think that the jury is still out in terms of the impact that these tariffs have had on Americans, on consumers here in this country. The inflation numbers went up. We heard from President Trump this week, it's not his fault that inflation went up. We'll see if voters are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, when he says things like that. Typically speaking, presidents, when they are in office and bad things happen, they get the blame. And when good things happen, they get to take credit for it. So we'll see. I mean, people are still going to the supermarket and seeing egg prices as high as they've ever been, and other types of commodities as expensive as they've ever been. So, that still is something that I think is impacting Americans on an everyday basis. These tariffs, a lot of people have a hard time understanding the intricacies of them. It really just comes down to an effort to try to get companies here and businesses here to buy American-made products and goods, and that is a way for businesses here in the U.S. to avoid having to pay those import tariffs. But again, it's something that's playing out right now. We will see what happens. President Trump doesn't want to take any blame for inflation, and given the fact that he doesn't have to run for re-election again, he can say those things.
And of course, we have the 2026 midterms, which are now really less than 2 years away. We always, in those midterms, we typically see the office that is out of power in the White House, typically doing much better in the congressional midterms. Any feel for what some of the major issues are going to be in November 2026? I know I'm kind of throwing a curveball at you. A lot can happen between now and November 2026 will be a millennium, it will almost seem, and we can be talking about issues that are completely diametrically opposed to what's dominating the headlines here. Obviously, Senator John Ossoff is up for re-election.
That's right.
The National Republican Senatorial Committee has targeted Georgia's Senate seat as one for a possible takeover. What's your feeling going into the midterms a year and a half away from
Yeah,
now.
well, I mean, it's still very, very early, of course. And like you said, anything can happen. I mean, a natural disaster could happen 2 weeks before the midterm elections that could turn everything upside down. We've seen that happen before. But certainly you're right. Historically speaking, the midterm elections, it's the party that's in power that tends to lose some seats, and the party that is in the opposition tends to gain some seats. That's just the way that it typically goes. It's not a rule, but it's what traditionally happens. And you know, in this case, we have the Republican Party in control not just of the White House, but of the Senate and the House of Representatives as well. And so, you know, there are majorities in the House, very, very slim. Their majority in the Senate is a little bit bigger, but also small, relatively speaking. Will there be enough of a backlash if consumers are not happy with the way things are going when it comes to inflation, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to the economy? You know, that will be a way for voters to voice their displeasure, will be to go to the polls and to vote for the other party. That said, the other party has to come out with some messages that are appealing to American people and the American voter. And so far, I think it must be said that the Democratic Party is still looking like it's on its heels and having a hard time coming up with you know, not just a message, but a messenger. There really has not been a strong Democratic voice, someone from the party who has been willing to step up and become the spokesperson for, you know, for the opposition. You know, obviously Chuck Schumer is the Senate Minority Leader. Hakeem Jeffries is the House Minority Leader. These are the two leaders of their parties in the respective bodies. But, you know, so far I haven't seen either one of them command the kind of attention from the media and from the general public that they really will need to, or that somebody will need to, if they're going to make a persuasive case to voters come the midterms, that this is a good opportunity to maybe take some of the power away from the Republican Party instead of having them be in power across the board. Perhaps a divided government might be better when it comes to trying to achieve some of the goals that American voters have.
And American voters have typically been in favor of more of a divided government. In recent elections. Those are just some of the issues we will continue to follow here on Atlanta News First on our political update. Also reminding you to watch Political Update every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. on our YouTube channel, as well as wherever you receive your streaming services, Roku or whatever streaming device that you use. Also, be sure and listen to all of Atlanta News First podcast, including Political Update, Decatur Dish, and Behind the Investigation, and others on Apple Music, Amazon, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen and download your podcasts. For Rick Volbaum, I'm Tim Darnell for this edition of Political Update on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com.